nothing comes for free, and life isn't fair. Get over it.
Yeah, that would always. Man, those are two things that my mom told me. Like, she's like, "That's the way the ball bounces. That's how the cookie crumbles."
Yeah.
Why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? Like, it's like tough titty. When I got older, she's like, "You think you're hot shit in a champagne bottle, but all you are is a cold turd in a Dixie cup. You're a kid, and I'm your mother, and I brought you into this world. I can take you out. People in hell want ice water." So,
your mom is awesome.
All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm coming at you from Mountain Ops headquarters in Utah, and I'm in the Gritty Mountain Ops podcast studio. That's I christened it this morning with.
How did it feel?
Felt great. I mean, me and Matt Davis just hammered it. Yeah. It was good. So,
if you're gonna hammer it with somebody, I highly suggest doing it with Matt.
Yeah, it was great. So, anyway, I'm here now with Casey and Jordan Harbertson, owners of Mountain Ops and friends of mine, good friends of mine, and we're going to talk today about a few things. I told Casey before we got started, I want to do a podcast where I pick your brains a little bit and get to know you more. I know you guys really well, but something about putting the headset on and recording it sort of takes it to another level sometimes. And so I want to get inside your minds and I want to bring people along. And you guys are very successful in what you've been able to accomplish with Mountain Ops, this brand, this company that you've built. And, Tim Ferriss does a podcast where he interviews successful people and he asks them a lot of questions on how he tries to unpack what it is that has made them successful. Okay. And I have some family. I'm an uncle who, not an uncle, but a great uncle who, one day, I think I was maybe 17, and he sat down. He's very, very, very wealthy, multiple times wealthy, and he said, we were talking about my career path and where I wanted to go in college and all this stuff for the future and business, and I was picking his brain because he's a very successful person, and he said to me, "Brian, let me just tell you this thing. If you took the money away from all the people that had it right now, all the wealthiest people that have it in the United States right now, they'd have it back in 5 to 10 years." And I was like, dude, how arrogant is that? I remember thinking that was a ridiculous statement. And as I've gotten older, and I've gone through much of life, I agree with him. And I've seen the same people be successful and the same people fail over and over again. And so I'm fascinated by people who are successful in a given field or in life in general or in business. Because you can measure success a lot of ways. You can measure it socially. You can measure success financially. You can measure it based on someone's, how their relationships are. Like, there's all these ways, right? So when I say successful, it doesn't mean when I talk about someone who's successful, they can be successful in many areas or one area. They can be super fit or they can have a great family or whatever it might be. In your case, when I talk success, I'm referring to you're successful in growing the business that you have today of Mountain Ops. So I wanted to get into that a little bit. Before I go there, though, I want to just get a little bit about about some of your, some of the key experiences as a youth, as a child, as a young man that kind of informed who you are today. And let's start with you, Casey. Thinking back on your childhood, how you were raised, and your background in that space. What do you think was some of the most influential parts of experiences or things about your youth that kind of shaped the way you are today?
I would say the couple that come to mind would be One of them wasn't necessarily like a one-time experience. It was something that kept happening time and time again. And that was that my dad, during our early stages of childhood, was not home a lot. Mm-hmm. He started a business the year Jordan was born, so I was like 18 months or something like that, a year, just over a year when he started it. And so, like, my earliest memories of my dad really aren't until I was almost in junior high. Mm-hmm. But something that happened during that time was when I was in kindergarten, my dad drew a buffalo tag on the Henry Mountains in Utah, and he killed a buffalo, and he was there with my uncles, and I didn't get to go along because he felt like I was too young. And I remember opening the door to the garage when he got home, and it was, usually I would see him like, I don't know, I'd say every other day, depending upon when I went to bed as a kid, but I didn't see him for so long that I was so excited to see him when he got home from this hunt. And I remember, so this is really honestly one of my earliest memories that I can still remember, but I remember opening the door, and all of a sudden I looked, and he had a tarp laid out, and there was buffalo quarters and a buffalo head. And then he was standing on the other side of the garage. And that was the first time where I was like, what is this? And I got on top of the buffalo head, and I still have a picture today of me like smiling with this. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to do this. And so really what I saw was like my dad was a very, very hard worker our entire lives, and eventually got to the point where he could spend more time with us due to that hard work and sacrifice. But that moment I had there of with the buffalo was really what triggered that passion for, and I didn't know what it was. Like I didn't even know it was like hunting.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because here you are, you see a dismembered body on the floor, and you're like, I want this. Like, help us understand, help a person who doesn't hunt understand.
So for somebody that doesn't understand, like, I was so passionate about animals. I'm an artist, and I've been drawing pictures of animals since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And that was my first opportunity to touch an animal that was unobtainable to me, because, you can go touch a horse, you can touch a cow, you can touch a dog. But I was like, holy smokes, like, even at 5, I knew, I don't know if I'd ever been to Yellowstone or anything at that point, but I knew like this was an animal that I had drawn pictures of, but I could never like physically interact with.
Yeah, possess.
Exactly. And when I saw that there, I was like, this is how I do that. Like, I have to somehow obtain this animal, and so it was just different. And then as I got older and understand the concept of hunting, actually the next year, my uncle drew the buffalo tag, and my dad said, so I'm only 6 years old at this point, and he's like, you are coming on this hunt. So I went on my very first hunt when I was 6 years old, and it was a buffalo hunt. And when my uncle killed his buffalo, that was the same time that Dances with Wolves was happening. Mm-hmm. And me and my cousin actually found the gut pile, and we started eating what we thought was the heart to be like Dances with Wolves, which I now know I was eating lung. So we've got video of me and my cousin with just blood all over our face. Like from that moment, I just became so obsessed with animals and then, watching Dances with Wolves and all these things and wanting to hunt. And I didn't really understand the concept of really obtaining your own meat. It was more like I just wanted to have more interaction with the animal, if you will. Yeah,
I was going to say, when you brought that up, Shane Mahoney's been a guest on the podcast. I've interacted with him a few times. I'd love to hear him speak. Renowned conservationist, and and if you haven't heard that podcast, folks, you should go back and listen to it. And any podcast Shane has done on other podcasts, anytime he's been a guest, he talks about when you go into a nursery, and there's all these kids in there. And they're all playing with toys, and they've got all their different games. He's like, if you walk into that nursery with a puppy, every kid will drop its toys and go to that puppy. How is it that you bring in another toy and maybe a couple kids will be interested in it, but it's universal from the time that human beings are just small. We have a natural fascination for animals.
And me personally, I don't know the science or whatever you can put behind it. This is more of a theory of mine, but I look at, all my grandpas, great grandpas, and everybody before me were all hunters.
Uh-huh.
And so genetically, I feel like that was placed inside of me to have that. And you look far, far to the very first ancestors, and, of our ancestors that were, hunters and gatherers. I feel like I came from a line of hunters, and that's just something that was bred in me. And I've been fascinated with animals from a very young age because of that.
I agree. I think it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned the word possess, because that can have a negative connotation to someone on the outside. Like, you shouldn't be able to possess a deer or an elk. Like, that's a wild living thing. But the fact is we have to eat. Mm-hmm. And that means the taking of a life so that we can thrive.
Yep.
And that's the circle of life and part of how it goes. And I would rather let an animal be free, take it, and consume it. And as part of that, there comes a drive for possession. And Shane actually mentions that as a part of our DNA, the desire to actually possess that animal, to like put our hands on it, to touch it, to look at it. And then further, as you start to take it apart, you get familiar with the parts inside, the lungs, the heart, the liver, the stomach. Like, where does all this stuff exist and what's it look like? And as a human being, we start to put together what we must be like inside, and all these pieces come together as a human animal, as a human being, that kind of keep completing who we are and helping us develop into the beings we are today. And to divorce ourselves from that or act like there's not, hundreds of thousands or millions of years of human experience behind that is it's ridiculous to try to take that apart. So interesting. So your dad was gone a lot. So he worked really hard, and that experience with that animal, just all that together sort of sparked something in you.
Well, it did. And so the other thing too is so when I was 10 years old, it was funny. Me and my wife were going through some of my old things, and I found my very first paycheck. I got my very first paycheck when I was 9 years old. And I was making $4.25 an hour working for my dad, and my check was for $12.50. So I worked like 3 hours, 4 hours.
Right.
And so he instilled in us work ethic at a very young age. And what we would do, or what I did when I was 9 years old, as it says on the check, was I basically was like a janitor, cleaning toilets. At 9 years old, I went into his business. And so what happened is we were instilled same thing.
I think that's illegal.
Not when it's a father and his sons.
Yeah. It's not child labor if
it's your own children.
Yeah, I guess. Trust me, I tried using that on him all the time. There's other times where that I remember. I know you want to talk about specific points, but we would work. I remember working, and we would work during summers. That's when it was, when we were out of school. I never had a normal summer where you would just go play. Like, I literally don't know what that's like. But I would go and work and do a day's work, and what our dad would do in return for compensation was he would take us out to this little place called Atlantis Burger and buy us a burger and fries, or a chicken sandwich and fries. And it cost him like probably $3.25, 20 years ago, but that 20 plus years ago, but that was, and
big
to
deal.
us, we were like, sweet, like, yeah.
Because we never got to go
out.
Like, we didn't, like, our family, we didn't go to McDonald's a lot.
No,
like,
we never had soda.
It was always,
like
mom was
we
always
didn't have sugar
cooking
cereal. It was, So anyway, there was that hard work that was instilled at a very young age. And when I was in ninth grade, I was introduced to the skateboard. And I'm tall. I'm 6'2", so most people would look at me and be like, oh, he probably played basketball. No, that was Jordan who played basketball. I fell in love with boards, so skateboards, wakeboards, snowboards, all those things. So in ninth grade, I was introduced to the skateboard, and I became your typical skater with the black hair and the baggy pants and tearing up the streets and wreaking havoc all over the place, and loved every second of it. Got really big into wakeboarding. So my passions were, I would do skateboarding, wakeboarding, snowboarding during the quote unquote off season of hunting. And then as soon as hunting rolled around, I always wanted to be in the woods hunting, chasing deer, elk, whatever we had the opportunity to. But when I was 19 years old, this was probably like the biggest thing that happened to me. I barely graduated high school, like barely. And I ended up graduating high school, and me and my best friend Jake went on a senior trip to Lake Powell, and we were wakeboarding, and, you know, we were actually pretty good. Like, my goal at that time was I wanted to be a professional wakeboarder. That was what was going to provide my living for my family. And I was wakeboarding and crashed and couldn't walk for like 3 months. And, doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Sorry to get emotional, but you talk about what changed my course and direction in life was this event. I was finally diagnosed through a blood test because I'd seen about 20 different specialists and they couldn't figure out why I couldn't walk, with something that's called ankylosing spondylitis, which is a degenerative form of arthritis that is located in my sacroiliac joints, which is where the spine meets the sacrum and the ilium, which is joints in your hip. And so I have this disease, which I'll have for the rest of my life, that I was diagnosed at 19, which basically told me you cannot do any more impact sports. No more skateboarding, no more snowboarding, no more wakeboarding, because the result of this disease is that my spine will fuse. And so every 6 weeks, I actually have to go get medicine that allows my spine, the inflammation that is created in the antibodies that are trying to fuse my spine, it stops them. And it's incredibly expensive. And so my entire life shifted because I kind of went through this phase. I remember giving Jordan my wakeboard, my skateboard, and I was like, enjoy it. I can never do it again.
It was the weirdest thing. I was sitting in my room and Casey just comes up because I'm witnessing this from kind of, you know, from the side, and I'm watching my brother who I had, you know, aspired to be like in board sports too. We did a lot of similar things together, and he comes up in my room and he brings his vest, his life jacket, his wakeboard, his snowboard, like everything he had. And he just threw it in my room, and you could see he threw it out of anger. You know, he was mad. He was not happy. And he was just like, this is yours. And I'm like, cool. You know, I'm like, this is all mine. But no, he threw it all down, and he was like, I'm done. You know, I can't do any of this anymore. And he literally turned around and walked out. And I was just like, what's going on? You know, because I think you had seen the doctor and he had just got the news.
Yeah, I just got the news. The doctor was like, none of this. And what's interesting is at that time, like, there really wasn't a lot known about the disease. So I've had this, I'm 32, so I've had it for almost half of my life now. And so what was cool was, you know, it was cool trying to find positive in the situation, was that with this form of arthritis, the more activity I do outside of impact is actually better for it because it keeps me loose. Where other forms of arthritis, they actually tell you stop doing activity because that increases inflammation, causes more issues. So for me, the best actual like exercise for me to do is hike. Because what it does is it keeps those joints mobile, moving, free. Because a lot of times what can happen is the muscles can really get stiff from all the inflammation from the joint. And if I go and hike, then it keeps me
so staying active, but not
without
high impact.
So I can't run. I did the 5K down in Vegas at Shot a couple years ago. That was the first time I had ran in 10 years. Literally all of my cardio is done through hiking. And so as I transitioned and understood how my life had to change at that point, my focus became more of hunting. And at that time, I really only knew hunting of, okay, so it's 1 week a year for deer and a couple weeks for elk. And that was kind of it. I didn't realize there was other opportunity out there. But you want to say something?
Well, I want to give Jordan a chance here in a minute, but what I want is, I want you to later, I want to ask you how these things then shaped the direction and the position you're in today. And I kind of can with your diagnosis. But I want to get more into how the business has, you know, how has the business why this business and what made you successful here. So think about that. And Jordan, what are those experiences for you as a young man that kind of put you on the path you are right now?
Similar to Casey in a lot of ways, being brothers and our dad, the way him and our mom were, and the way they raised us. Same story when it came to cleaning garbage cans and getting a paycheck from THB. The Harbertson Brothers Incorporated is what it stood for. Cause my dad and his brother Rob both started a business, selling fasteners, nuts and bolts and stuff like that. And so that was a big part of like mine and Casey's life. And some really big pinnacle moments of what kind of really helped like shape my life was, I remember as a young kid, and Casey touched on a little bit, like, if we ever wanted anything, we always asked, like, oh, Dad, like, I remember I wanted to get a snowboard. Mm-hmm. I saw Casey had gotten one, and I'm like, oh, I want to get a snowboard. And when my parents like bought me this, like, it was like one from Kmart back when Kmart was
$10.
It was the ones that it didn't even have. It just had 2 straps. It didn't even have bindings. It was for just like
kill yourself on the steps.
Yeah, and I'm like, Dad, do you realize this
doesn't count?
This
isn't going to get me there.
And he says, well, if you want a snowboard, then go earn one. And at the time, I was really into like basketball cards, and trading cards and stuff like that. And my dad actually had ownership in a trading card business, and so he did that because that was one of his passions, and so he would get them at wholesale. He could buy lots of packs and stuff on the market. Well, he taught me some really valuable lessons through this opportunity that he always saw, and was able to time and time again between Casey and I continually teach us how to be entrepreneurs, and we didn't even know it was happening.
Yeah.
And so he gave me this old little table, and he said, "Okay, son, I want you to take this table. I want you to go put it on the corner. And I want you to, we're going to take some of your cards, your baseball cards you got, and it had this cardboard box of people who used to collect cards. Remember, it had just these strips, and you'd put all your cards in it and put dividers and sets and nice cards and all that, or cards that were autographed or whatever it was." He says, "I want you to take all your cards and all your cards that aren't the best. Let's grab a bunch of those and let's mix them up. And then we're going to take like 10 of your best, and we're going to insert those, and we're going to make these little homemade basketball and baseball, football packs
out of a brown paper
sack. And so we're going to stick them in the paper sack. We're going to roll it. We're going to tape it, and you're going to put $1. And I remember I was like so excited. I'm like, so like I'm going to sell baseball cards. Like, yeah, go on so we created this sign, and we went and photocopied the cards, and we glued them on there to show you the Michael Jordan or the Steve Young or some of these big cards that kids want. And back then, like, my dad was into cards, and back then, before like Pokemon and all this stuff now, so was adults. And a couple kids up the street are peddling lemonade for 25 cents, and Jordan's down here peddling basketball cards and brown paper sacks for $1. And I sat there on the corner, and I remember sitting there on the corner, and I was like, I wonder if I'm going to sell any. I wonder if I'm actually going to make, any money. Cause my dad's like, you're going to need to earn some money. So like, you come to THB, or you make some money this way too. And all of a sudden, I remember, boom, business came. Yeah. Like, I started selling packs. Like, I had enough good cards and some desirable
other kids
cards.
are playing ball down the street.
Yeah.
You're pimping cards literally on the corner.
We never got to do anything fun like that, because we were always trying to figure out, like, how to earn $1. Like, it was like, most people probably are listening to this like, wow, lame childhood.
Yeah, no, seriously. If it wasn't basketball cards, it was pulling scrub oak. Yeah. Like, we were always doing yard work, So I remember.
This kind of reminds me of like Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, like talking about his youth. Like, it was always about, business, entrepreneurship, trying to make something, build something.
Yeah. And that honestly is like, and that was one, and our dad just recently sold his business after 32 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. So how old, like Casey said, how long he's been alive is how long that business has been operating, and now they've sold it. And so it's cool that you're asking us these questions, because I just wrote a letter to my dad explaining a lot of these things that I'm sharing with everybody here on the podcast. Mm-hmm. And so that was really a pinnacle point in my life, that at the time I was trying to earn a snowboard. Yeah. I was trying to he was teaching me a principle of working, building something and then earning money and then being able to go and get something that you want, not just asking for something you want and then receiving it. That was not how Casey and I were raised. We were never, in fact, what I always remember growing up with mom and dad come Christmas, or come birthdays, we'd always ask for the things we want. And we'd always get the things that were the closest things to it, but not what it was.
Well, maybe that's what you got. I would ask for,
and that was only like sometimes.
I would ask for a Nintendo, and I would get pencils and socks and underwear.
I should say Nintendo was never allowed in our home. Like all of our friends had Nintendos or PlayStations or Xboxes, and Casey and I, my parents were like anti that. They're like, and again, as a kid growing up, even to talk simply just about that, my dad never allowed Casey and I to ever play video games. It was not allowed. I tried getting computer games, and he ended up shutting that down. And he always wanted me or Casey to go outside. Mm-hmm. He always wanted, and so as a kid, I like Casey, as he explained, from a very young age, became very fascinated and began to have a love for hunting, or animals. And for me, like the outdoors, I loved, like I played imaginary a lot. Like when I had time, when I wasn't peddling basketball cards on the corner instead of lemonade, and I was out, I would go outside and I would imagine I was Indiana Jones, or I was in World War II or in the Alamo, and I would play out these scenarios.
I can picture it now. Jordan's creative mind. He go to another place all by himself.
Casey's got pictures of him.
Stick guns.
Oh man. Casey's got pictures of him with like dead buffaloes, and I got me and like these awesome sticks I'd find that I'd imagine were guns. And it's interesting because as a creative, like that's a process, is like imagination and vision and thinking through things. And so as a child, my parents strongly encouraged that. Like my mom and dad loved that I went out. My mom and dad were like, go out and do that. And so there were so many facets and parts of my youth that really impacted what I've become, and that being our father and our mother, and the way that they raised Casey and I, and the way Casey and I didn't even know it, but the way our dad began to teach us the very basic, simple principles of entrepreneurship.
And not just entrepreneurship, because
ownership, I would say ownership is probably a better word to say, because ownership in like taking ownership for not only our own lives, taking ownership in the things that we wanted to do or accomplish, championing us to be able to be successful at, board sports or things like that.
But it sounds to me too, like he taught you that nothing in life is free.
That was number one in the Harbertson home.
Something that just is lost on a lot of people today, and include adults as well as kids. Like they don't understand that everything has a cost.
Yeah,
nothing is free. Like if you want something, it just doesn't come on a handout.
It doesn't grow on a tree.
No.
The two most common phrases in our home were, nothing comes for free, and life isn't fair. Get over it.
Yeah. That would always.
Man, those are two things that my mom told me. Like, she's like, that's the way the ball bounces. That's how the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
Why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? Like, it's like,
and I think something, I think one thing that I want to maybe even just address real quickly to that point is that, so my dad, or our dad and our mom, because of the good business practices that him and his brother did, they were very successful. And so we did live in a very nice home in Farmington. We had nice amenities. We had nice things. And the thing that I loved about my dad and my mom is that although Casey and I and our siblings had this wonderful place, we weren't treated like, it wasn't like
you weren't treated that way.
No. And they didn't allow us. Like they never, I know now being older, my dad and mom had the money to buy me that snowboard. My mom and dad had the money to buy us a Nintendo. They had the money to do these things because after all the sacrifices that Casey addressed earlier with my dad not seeing him, when we started to see him was when his business was being more successful and he was doing well. But both of them decided that they wanted to raise us a way that they knew would set us up to be more successful and to be able to be more responsible and make a difference in the world. And so The second thing, yes, kind of like the second thing that really kind of was a pivot in my life was, me growing up, some of my personal struggles and the things that I kind of fought, or demons, was like I craved social acceptance. All through school, as I began to go do schooling, I wanted friends, and I loved friendships, and I loved relationships, and I loved these things so much that I would do anything to have them. And as many kids growing up in elementary or going into, junior high and into high school, one of the things you want to be is a part of the cool kids club, or a part of the clique, or, whoever's the most popular. And I went through school being a part of those groups, being accepted into those groups. And then I got to a point where I wasn't accepted into those groups. And that was super hard. And I remember, people always ask me, like, everyone's your friend. Everybody likes you. You seem like just everybody's friend. And, I said, that's not how it always was. I had to learn some really, really hard lessons early on, and especially in junior high, where, and I had mentioned this earlier on another podcast, but not in depth. And I won't go too in depth to it, but I'll cover just the surface of it. I hit a really, really low point in my life, because of, just how the school system is, and the cliques and kids and the gossip and these things. And they said some pretty heinous, untruthful things about me that got around school and almost just alienated me instantly. And I was just on an island. Nobody wanted to be my friend. Nobody wanted to be associated for a period of time. And it drove me to the deepest depths of depression. And so people always do say, man, you're always so happy. You're always like so outgoing. Like, how are you always so happy? And it's like, it wasn't always that way either. Because I got to a point in my life where I wanted to take my life. And I know some people listening to this podcast can relate to that. And it's a very sensitive subject. And that's why I don't want to go too deep into it, but I got to that point at a point in my life. And I remember when I was in that point in my life, and it seemed that the world was crashing down. Nobody wanted me. Nobody cared about me. Nobody loved me, because I created that as well. All of a sudden, that's when Casey came to my rescue. That's when my friends, or who I thought were my friends, weren't there, and obviously were willing to just disown me because of, these obscene things. Casey and his friends, he had mentioned earlier, like Jake Shaw and some of his buddies, they were willing to come from a higher grade, and these cool kids.
We were the cool kids.
They were the cool kids of their grade.
Right.
They were willing to accept me, and they accepted me, and not just because I was Casey's brother, because they truly cared about me.
They valued you.
They valued me, and they're like, dude, you're with us. And so we would go snowboarding together, we'd go wakeboarding together, we'd do all these things together. So I started hanging out with these guys instead of this crap, and they all, mostly Casey, but them included, really kind of saved my life and helped me see that, like, this doesn't matter. These guys are stupid. What they're saying, dude, you'll get to a point where you just won't matter. And, they started to even share and teach life lessons. And all along that way too, my mom and dad were there.
Yeah.
You know how it is. When we were younger, we kind of disregarded parents and said, like, you just don't understand. You don't know. They loved me the whole time. They were there the whole time praying for me and
let you grow though and figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. And so that was a really pivotal point too in my life, because that was right when I was around that 16 age, 16, and Casey you were 18 at the time, and Casey was about to leave now soon and go on a mission for our church, and set a really good example for me and what I also wanted to do that our dad had done. And so, Casey has also played a really big part in my life as far as what he did to help me in a time in my life where I may not even be here today.
Yeah.
And that's something that was a really important part of my life that I learned, like Vandercheck says, 99% of things don't matter.
Right.
I began to learn that principle. I began to learn the principle of like that you can find a silver lining, just like Casey did in his own situation. In everything, there's a silver lining. You can find positivity among negativity. And I began to be more happy. And then as I went out and I served my LDS mission, that right there is really where I would say Jordan 2.0 was truly born.
Yeah.
The Jordan you see today and the people, the Jordan that everybody sees either on social media or with Mountain Ops and all that, had a lot of molding to be shaped to who I am. So there's a lot. I'm trying to really just hit a few of that. But I remember that where everything truly changed and where I turned that corner was when I went and I served my my LDS mission, and I also learned not just about what I could do for myself, right? How I could better myself, but how I could help other people. And how I could learn the principle of being selfless.
I have a question for you, Casey. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're
Jordan.
fine.
When you saw Jordan coming back, did you notice a difference
From his mission?
2.0 Jordan?
Yeah. We're Mormon, and I'm like, who the hell are you? No, seriously, it was crazy. So, like you said, I served a mission
He
as
served
well,
in
and so
Oregon.
Portland, baby.
Portland. That's actually that's honestly the reason how Brian and I got connected was because of that. But anyways, so I broke my arm in the middle of my mission and had to go home for surgery because I was skateboarding on my mission.
He came home and told our parents that he had fallen off his bike and broke his arm.
I've got some killer scars from the surgery.
Dude, those are some hefty scars.
That's from the skate park in Bethany.
That's how he got his wife.
So anyways, so I did get to see Jordan for a brief period right around the time he was graduating high school before I went back on my mission, or else I wouldn't have
been like a 4-year gap.
It would have been a 4-year gap. And so I was able to like see who he had become without me because I had been gone for about a year. And it was cool to see like how much he had matured.
Yeah.
But then when I saw him the 2 years later,
Yeah.
I was literally like, who are you? I see who you are physically, but like, this is incredible because that's not who he was before. And so what's awesome is, you know, I tell people all the time, if you want to party, you want to hang out with Jordan. If you want to get business done, like you're going to hang out with me. Yeah. But that's what's cool is because it wasn't always that way.
I know you both very well. It's funny how you know someone, but you don't know these things unless you get into that talk, you know. And hearing you talk about your you know, what shaped you as kids, it's interesting. And I know you guys haven't listened to this podcast, and you should, but podcast 290 I did with my grandpa. And you guys need to go back and listen to that podcast. A lot of people, you got a lot of downloads for that show. A lot of people, there's certain shows like about Suzanne's cancer, maybe where her and I sit down, where it's not about hunting or broadheads or bow and arrows or whatever. So the downloads I get for that compared to, you know, elk hunt in Colorado are totally different, right? It's still a lot, but it's probably a half maybe of what I get on a more typical hunting podcast. But the engagement I get on those podcasts in terms of emails, personal DMs and stuff like that is through the roof. It's always the people that take the time to listen to that are usually very moved by it. And there's a review on iTunes I was reading the other day, and this guy said, I just finished 290. He said, I must admit, when I started listening to this episode, I was like, seriously? 3 hours of talking to his grandpa? I could have listened to that but he goes, but I could have listened to that old boy go on for days. That is one tough son of a bitch. A guy could live 100 lifetimes and never have stories that would match those. I think I'm going to have my 20 and 18-year-old sons listen to this one. Thanks for sharing. With my grandpa, you know, I encourage people to go back and listen to episode 290. And I think anytime you can sit down and hear someone's story that has a remarkable story and that made a big impact and is making an impact in people's lives, they got something figured out. There's something about what happened to them that shaped them, that made them who they are. And there's so much to be gained from that. And when you talk about your childhood, it's very, very similar to my own in terms of work ethic. Nothing's for free. I was thinking of these things that my mom would say to me. Like I go to my mom and say, Mom, I want to get a snowboard. By the time I was old enough to say that, I knew better than to ask. But let's say I was like, hey, I want a G.I. Joe figure. She'd say, people in hell want ice water. And she'd walk away.
That's my new one for my
kids.
Like,
That's one of the best ones I've heard.
And then I would say, I was like, Mom, it's really not fair. I really wanted to go out with my friends tonight, and you're telling me I got to clean the garage. It's not fair. And she's like, tough titty. And then she'd walk off, and it was like, there was no like discussion. Or when I got older, she's like, you think you're hot in a champagne bottle, but all you are is a cold turd in a Dixie cup. So don't tell me how to raise, don't talk to me like this, because you're a kid and I'm your mother and I brought you into this world. I can take you out.
Yeah,
and so that was like the sort of thing that my mom would do, and my dad too. So we didn't get things for free, but I would say the difference though is my parents were poor. I mean, they just didn't have money. So they couldn't actually go out and buy me a snowboard or a bicycle or some of these things. And I remember they were young when they got married. They were 17 when I was born, and they were young, right? And so they owned their mistakes and they made the best of them, and they continued to grow as people. But we lived in a trailer, on this piece of property they bought forever, little dinky trailer. And then before we lived in the trailer, though, they bought the land. We lived in a tent. And we lived in a tent for a long time. And then the tent started to leak, and Oregon rains a lot and flood a lot. And we ended up sleeping in the Volkswagen van. And it was funny. We'd sleep in the van, and my dad worked a graveyard shift at the trucking company. And you'd go to bed at like 8, and then the van would start up about, 11 p.m., midnight. And he'd drive into the work, and he'd leave it parked in the parking lot, go drive the truck. We would be sleeping there, and then he'd drive home, and we were in a mobile. Our residence was also the family car, so he went where it went, and I didn't notice any of it. I grew up on lots of property, and there was no video games. There's no electricity, so we were outside. We cooked on camping stoves, and we did that for a long time. And then we got a little trailer we lived in, and we got a mobile home. And then as I got into high school, my parents got a house, but we didn't get a lot of those things. And so I had a lot of similar experiences in the sense that, if I wanted it, I had to earn it. And and my life isn't fair. I mean, those are things that got hammered home for me as well. So,
Mom said that a lot to us. I brought you into this world. I'll take you out.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Like
I think
your mom sounds
more than she said.
Yeah,
it to me.
I was coined as the quote unquote hell child
for sure.
I gave my mom the most grief, not only from birth because she did a natural birth to me and I was like a 10-pound baby, but also because like I gave her the most. But I think that's what's really, because I love hearing like your take on like what happened in your life, and it's parallel. Like my parents were extremely poor. Like I speak to the time, I was speaking to the time when we had a nice home and they had the money, but they didn't for a long time.
We got in like high school.
Mm-hmm. And it was same conditions, like
it would have been so easy for them to just give you what you wanted.
Yeah, and make us happy. And I think, Brian, one thing that you said that just really stuck out to me and just kind of made an impression was like, those things didn't matter. It did then.
A little bit.
As a child.
As high school, it mattered to me.
Yeah.
In high school, it mattered a little bit to me.
Yeah.
Before high school, I didn't give a dang where we lived, or that I didn't even know I was missing.
You didn't know anything different.
It wasn't until I was comparing in a, keeping up with the Joneses sort of way, my life to someone else's life. And I actually didn't care that they had a fancier car and home and things like that. I actually didn't care about that. I cared about what they thought about that. Mm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's different caring. Like I didn't actually want that. I loved I loved all the property, all the crawdads we caught in the stream, and all the fishing that we did, and all the running around in the tree forts you built. Like, I cared about that, but I did not care about. But I didn't want what they had, which is a big house and a subdivision. Not even. But I was a little bit worried about what they thought about our income level.
You know, well, go ahead.
What's interesting is people would come over to our houses. We would have parties or, hang out in high school, junior high. And I mean, yeah, we did. We lived in a big house with a big yard and people would come over and they'd be like, "You are rich."
You're like, dude, I can't even get my dad to give me a snowboard.
What I would say is
$5 allowance per week.
What you don't realize, we never even had allowance.
Yeah, it's
what
true.
you don't realize.
Either. When I asked for allowance, my mom's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm not giving you money for living."
Yeah. But when they would say, "You are rich," I would immediately say, "I don't know who you're freaking talking about. And my dad's rich. I don't have anything.
We don't have a dime,
and he doesn't give me jack. Like,
we don't
he's
even
probably
go to
gonna
McDonald's.
kick us out. Like,
we don't do a lot of things. I think another thing too, Brian, that on that same topic is our dad and mom are really good at teaching us like fiscal responsibility, like. When both Casey and I were growing up, he's talking about his paychecks and, the money that we'd get, and we didn't have allowances. We could earn money.
Yeah.
And each one of us were given I don't know if anybody else ever had these, it was a Tootsie Roll bank.
Piggy bank.
Mm-hmm. And I think mom just got them from like Wells Fargo or some bank.
She certainly didn't buy them.
They used to give those out instead of suckers back in the day.
Back in the day, they'd give those out instead of suckers, and now banks have got it a lot cheaper. And so each one of us as a kid had those. And I remember all the time Casey and I, we both actually shared a room for a long time, all the way up until
high school.
Mm-hmm. We lived in the same room together. So people always even joke now at Mountain Ops, like, how do you guys be in the same office? I'm like, we shared a freaking room. Like we didn't have really much privacy because it was like there was a line down the middle of the room. This is my side, your side, but like we were always together all the time. And I remember lots of times where Casey and I would dump out our Tootsie Roll banks and count them together and can see who had saved up the most money. And it was kind of just something fun that him and I did. But, that was something that our parents were really, I think we're both extremely grateful for, is that not only did they not just give us what we wanted, they taught us the principle of saving $1 and, earning $1 and then spending $1. But the spending part was something that they really taught us. Like, my dad really would hit home for Casey and I on that level of like, okay, you want your snowboard, so I'm going for the Burton board with the Burton bindings and the Burton boots. Like, I want the name brand and I want it brand new. And my dad's like, there's this section right here, and it's last year's stuff. Some of it's partially used.
Yeah.
It's going to give you the same outcome, and it's half the price. And I remember looking at my dad going, but this is this year's board, and this is their boots, and my friends have this, and this is what I want. And he steered me. He said, son, this board is capable. This fits he's like, well, how much money do you have?
Yes.
And I told him. And he's like, and so I remember buying this old used, it was called a nail board. Do you remember that board?
The orange one?
The orange one?
Yeah.
Like that company doesn't even exist anymore.
No, they went out of business because their stuff sucked.
And Airwalk, yeah. It was a poverty board. But I bought it and I went snowboarding. I went up Snow Basin, and even then, like another principle of like success comes, I think, a lot of times because of like hardship and learning a lot of things that we've talked a few of those things today, but like that was something too that just really stuck out to me. My parents were really good at teaching us like how to grow up and save money.
That right there is a principle of delayed gratification.
Yeah.
I think this is a key indicator of people that are successful in life. You read about the studies they've done where they take like a marshmallow or whatever, and they put it in front of like a couple of kids in a room, and they're like, you can eat that marshmallow right now, but if you wait 20 minutes, you can have a whole bag of marshmallows. And it's this test, and they've been able to track these kids that eat the marshmallow immediately versus the kids who wait for the whole bag of marshmallows later.
See, and I'm the kid that's like, how many marshmallows can I get if I wait an hour?
Right.
Like literally. Like I will drag it out. Like what's my ROI?
I'm the same way.
That principle of delayed gratification, I think, is especially lacking, and it's especially difficult for some people to do, because it's really giving up what you want, now, what you want right now for what you want most. And that was a quote that my mom would say all the time, which was, never give up what you want most in life for what you want now.
Yeah.
Never give up for what do you want most. And it forced me to think about, what do I want most? What do I want most in life? And it forced me to think about, to decide that instant gratification wasn't a road to success, that it wasn't going to get me the thing I wanted most. What I wanted most, if that's the goal, then it's worth waiting for and working for. And I think that's a principle that is lost on a lot of people.
It's lost on a lot of people. I'll tell you what was really, talk about instant gratification, delayed gratification. Do you remember Casey? So here's just a quick story, and then let's continue on. But I remember, and we had Casey and I both shared this earlier. We didn't have Nintendo. Mm-hmm. We didn't have anything. Like, it was no games in our house. Well, all of a sudden, Casey turns 18, right? So he's an adult. I have my own money. Casey went out and rebelled against my parents and got a cell phone.
Well, let me tell you how I got a cell phone.
He bought his own cell phone. Let me share this real quick.
That's a good story.
That's a good story. But all of a sudden he comes into adulthood and he's like, I've saved up my own money. I have my own money, and I'm going to spend my money.
I'm going to make choices for myself.
So what do you think was probably the first thing Casey wanted to go get when he was 18? And we had never played it before very much.
Nintendo.
He went and bought an Xbox.
Yeah.
And him and I Xboxed so hard. I'll never forget. It was I can honestly say, and even to this day, Casey and I still haven't played much gaming.
Yeah.
That was some of the funnest Xboxing or gaming I did in my life. We had, at the time, there was a Lord of the Rings game, and him and I played that thing every night.
Return of the King.
Over and over and over. Because guess why? We had never really played much.
Right.
Like, we didn't have a Nintendo. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it was like, we got the Nintendo, we played for hours, we had the time of our life, and then we were like,
this is so dumb.
Yeah, this is so dumb. Like, this is so dumb. Let's go do something awesome like wakeboarding or snowboarding.
Right.
But that delayed gratification was a lot of years until he could buy one, because he's an adult and he's like, this is my room, and I can just now tell him about your cell phone story.
Okay, so to give you an idea of my personality is like, if you tell me, I'm not like super competitive unless it comes to a few things. Like, if you want to play basketball and you win, like, cool, I don't freaking care.
Yeah.
But if you tell me I can't do something or can't have something, I will find a way. I'm just incredibly determined.
Yeah.
So our parents, even all of our friends, or all of my friends, started getting cell phones my sophomore year in high school. That's kind of when they were, you're past the pager stage. And I wanted one so bad, my parents wouldn't let me get one. And I was like, I would work after school. I had a job after school, and I said, I have the money to buy it. And they're like, nope, you can't have one. You cannot get a cell phone until you are 18. Mm-hmm. And so I stole my mom's Social Security card, went into the local T-Mobile, talked to the salesman, which I'm sure he was fine. He didn't care.
He just needed to sell.
He needed to sell.
Right.
But I was like, my mom can't come, but I have her Social Security number to be able to set up an account.
That's not suspicious or anything.
Oh, just wait. Okay, so you got to have mail sent somewhere, right? Uh-huh. So I'd send the mail to my best friend's house. I paid my cell phone bill every single month, and my mom's credit was on the line. Yeah. And I hope I don't go to jail for sharing this. But
That's the statute of limitations.
I was going to say I wasn't 18 yet, but that's how determined I was you can't tell me no. Like, if you tell me you can't build this or you can't grow that, you can't do that, I'm like, let me freaking show you how fast I can do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of.
Yeah, there's no ego there.
It's not a matter of ego.
There's a little ego.
No, but here's the deal is.
A little bit of pride.
Yeah, a little pride.
Here's what it is.
Pride.
I like the challenge.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's not ego.
No, I think that there's no one that's successful that doesn't have a competitive drive. I talked to Corey Jacobson. I talked to you, Casey, talked to Jordan, even myself, talked to Aaron Snyder. There's, in every single one of us, there is a, you think I can't do it? I'll show you I can do it. It's built into what kind of helps you be what you are, And, so, yeah, and it sounds like it's a little cockier. There's a little bit of ego in there, but, I think it takes a little bit of that. It takes that to be successful. You'll hear that, I think, from Gary Vaynerchuk, Tim Ferriss, Jocko. Like you take anybody in life that's fairly successful.
And I think the cockiness comes from, what do you do with that success? Do you rub it in people's face, or do you just carry on? And like for me, I was bound and determined to get that cell phone. And so I got it, but it wasn't like I was rubbing it in anybody's face. It was just
No, and he had to keep it hidden.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is like, so
what
Casey,
when the
Casey
phone
had
rang?
that was the thing is Casey had the cell phone, and when he was away from the house, because all of a sudden I found out.
Yeah.
I found out, and I was like, how do you have a cell phone? And he's like, don't you tell mom or dad. And I was like, and we were always had each other's backs. So I was like, I'm not going to tell, but I just want to know how you got one, because I want to get one, And he's like, dude, the way I got it, you're not going to be able to get it. But,
best we can find that guy.
I think that, that was that's Casey and I have the same drive. And growing up in the same room together and sharing everything together and doing everything together for a large, large part of our lives. Like, you can only imagine how competitive Casey and I were in a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And Casey whenever Casey would do something, whether it was skateboarding or wakeboarding, there was always a drive there for me to I want to do it too, but I want to do it as good or better.
Yeah.
And so we were always, what I at the time in life, we'd be butting heads and punching each other, being super competitive. But what we were really doing to each other is we just kept pushing each other farther and farther, pushing each other to be better. Mm-hmm. And while Casey was better than me at this, I would become better at this. And then he would have this drive, and literally we're chipping away at growing.
It's called competition. Competition makes the market, it improves the market. It makes people better. If you don't have any competition, what's going to push you to stay ahead?
Yeah, exactly.
There's hundreds of new podcasts. I better get things figured out,
Don't rest on your laurels, bro.
I better continually adapt. I better, always strive for something that adds value. And there's competition pushes you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so healthy. It's why Casey and I, we get asked questions a lot with Mountain Ops, mm-hmm. about some of our other competition, and the stance we have is the same. We're grateful for them. We're grateful for our competition. Keeps us hungry, keeps all of us honest, competitive, and driven to give our consumers better products or better experiences, instead of resting on laurels or sitting at the top and having no competition and just saying, we're good. We can just kind of ride this. So yeah, competition is definitely good.
So, Let's further this discussion. Casey, what is it? You built Mountain Ops, and you guys have this brand, and it's continuing to expand and grow all the time. And I think it's across the board. If you ask people in the hunting industry, if you ask them about Mountain Ops, what you've been able to accomplish in a short period of time is remarkable, mm-hmm. right? And of course, there's always people who, when they see success, and they often say, even with Gritty Bowmen podcast, I heard a lot of people say that, it just popped up overnight and then just got successful right away. What they don't understand is I'm 40 years old, and, a few years ago, and I lived a long life of other things before that helped hone and create the person I was, so that when I started to do Gritty Bowmen, that it was valuable and was successful. It's not that it happened overnight at all. Like, people look at it from the outside. Speaking of cell phones, I'll share this real tangent right here. This says, Nicole Wordley would like to FaceTime. Nicole Wordley is my daughter's friend. And so, Abigail has a cell phone.
Oh, and you fell into that trap.
Your phone does the same thing.
What?
Where FaceTimes when Nicole's trying to FaceTime, it somehow gets connected to you or something like that.
My kids will FaceTime from the computer.
Yeah.
They use
so Abigail's 12. So I got her a phone, but I want to see every single text, every single phone call, every FaceTime. I want to monitor everything she does. Oh, dude. When
you hover.
With the cell phone comes a lot of power. And so,
with a cell phone comes a lot of power.
A lot of power. She's
That's
12.
True.
But they live in a world today where I'm not sure that you can just
go without it.
Take them off of computers and iPads and phones and stuff. But I want to give them enough rope that they can learn these things and interact and use them and be skilled, but at the same time where they don't do something, they don't have enough rope to hang themselves. So I monitor all of Abigail's. And I don't monitor Caitlin's because I trust her, and I don't monitor Hannah because I trust her. Abby needs a little bit of
she's that child. Yep.
She needs a little bit of monitoring.
His name's Kaiden.
And so this phone is like,
dude,
this
Kaiden's
phone
smart.
is just. I had no idea how often girls talk to each other.
All day, dude.
Dude, it's unreal.
I go home. There's this new app called Marco Polo.
Oh, your wife. I remember.
Yeah. And our wives just Marco Polo each other, which is basically a video message to each other back and forth all day. And then you can get these groups, and I'm like, oh, you could just call. Like, no. It's so much better to just put the phone, say your message, send it, and then you watch their response. And they do this all day.
See, I'm
like Casey and I, we can be in the same room and not say a word to each other.
Yeah. I'm about to have this conversation with Abigail. We're going to sit down and I'm going to be like, there's some rules around, it's buzzing every minute. There's going to be some rules around Abigail's, how frequently she can have an interaction.
Tell me how that goes over.
Oh, dude, it's happening. I'm just like, it's ridiculous. So anyway, that's a tangent. People that might be listening or watching, my phone it's my daughter.
It's blowing. I'm checking mine like, is that me?
That's why I keep looking at my
right
watch.
now?
I'm like, man, they just keep coming at me.
Yeah, it's call me. Why aren't you calling me? How come you haven't picked up your phone? Done. Call me.
Do you not like
I just
me?
got out of the shower. It's like freaking A, girl. And every now and then I answer the phone and I'm like, it could be Nicole.
It's like watching an ESPN gamecast of your daughter's life.
Nicole, I'd like to remind you that I get every single one of Abby's texts and phone calls. So when you call her, you're also calling me. And then she gets all red-faced, and she's like, sorry, Mr. Call. Like, jeez.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Anyway, back to your business.
You said that the amount of time you're talking about time.
Yeah, in a short period of time, you built something special, something remarkable. And a lot of people would be like, it's just a flash in the fire, and then it'll be gone. Or there's always some reason. Or they just think you struck it lucky. Mm-hmm. You just got lucky. You know, a combination of a perfect storm of events happen. But as you can see, as we've had this discussion, you were informed from as young people a certain levels of hard work. You know, you're not out there playing when there's business to be done and things like that, and delayed gratification and these work ethic, all the stuff that you just talked about. It's built into you, which is went into this endeavor with Mountain Ops. And this wasn't your first successful company. There were other ones.
Yep.
And so what I want to get into, what I want to ask, so Casey, what is it that, what are a couple of things that you feel like are, because others are out there trying to, and I want to help other people that are listening to this podcast. Think of it through that lens, helping others achieve a goal or a dream or something that they've set up in terms of business. What do you say to them? How do they achieve what you've achieved?
So it's funny because as you sit here and say we are successful or that we've achieved something, I'm sitting here and I'm like in my brain going, what the freak are you talking about? Like, I guess we're successful. Like we run a company, like we own a company, we do this, we help people's lives through our, products and programs and things. But, I don't sit here and get hung up on what we're doing in the sense of I'm not here like, oh, look at me. I'm pretty damn successful. You should listen to me. Like, no, I'm just like the thing that frustrates my wife most about me is that I'm never satisfied. So if I want to get to here and I get to here, I'm not fine with here anymore. I want to get to here, and then I get there and now I want to get to here. And that's with everything in life. So if you ever, in any aspect of my life, I'm never satisfied. And in every aspect of my life, I never surrender. And so I never quit. My biggest fear in life is the fear of failure. And so I don't fear my competition. I don't fear spiders. I don't fear death. My fear is literally failing. And that's what fuels my fire for success I've failed. I have failed. And I don't like the feeling I have when I have failed, whether that's I've failed my child, I've failed my wife, I've failed in business, or I've failed in any aspect of my life. I hate that feeling.
That's heavy, dude.
Well,
failure is part of life.
That's what I mean. But that's what fuels me is I don't want to feel that way.
So as much as you can live your life in mitigating as much fear in your life as possible.
My only fear is that fear of failure. So what I do is the way that I succeed is I continue to improve success because I want to get as far away from failure as possible.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So a relentless attitude of I'll do whatever it takes within certain bounds, that would be like a value. Like I would never jeopardize any of my values to achieve success, which I think is hard in today's market.
Okay.
So relentless attitude of never surrendering, never satisfied, and really understanding that nothing comes easy, that it is hard work. It is long hours. It is time spent away from what you love or who you love most a lot of the time.
Okay. So it's a couple things. Hard work, willingness to sacrifice. And I heard you basically say that, you're relentless. Like you don't quit. You won't surrender. Mm-hmm. Okay. So two things you've got: that work ethic, willingness to sacrifice, willingness to work, and that you just won't quit. Like, as you fail, you'll just keep going. Okay. Let's say somebody has that, and there's a lot of people who do. And they those things alone won't get you there, right? But they'll probably get you. Sounds a lot like Cameron Haynes,
I was thinking keep hammering the whole time. So Casey doesn't run. He does shoot. He lifts a little bit.
But it does remind me of Cam talking to Joe Rogan where he's like, I remember everything that anybody ever said bad about me. Like I hold on to that, and I am like, it fuels me. Like I'm going to show you and the world and myself that I'm going to achieve. And I remember, I think Joe said something like, dude, that's a lot.
That's a lot of hate.
That's a lot. Like, you should let some of that go, maybe.
See, I don't hold on to that. That does fuel a small portion of me. Like when I see the hate out there towards what we're doing, I actually more so find it comical and laugh because they don't know the conversations that go on behind these walls. Like the one thing that I love and laugh at is when people say, oh, they're just there to get rich. And I'm like, oh, if you only knew the amount of money that we donate for good causes, we would be rich if we kept that money. But that's where I look internally at who we are as owners and our core values, and our other partner who's not here is Trevor, who has a heart of gold. And so when I see those things, it more fuels me to know I'm doing good. Because there's always going to be there's opposition in all things. So if there's no oppositions, that means we're not doing what we need to be doing. Yeah. And so, but at the same time, I'm not like Cam where I literally remember what everybody says. After I read it, it puts a little fuel in the tank and then it's gone.
Yeah. And I think he said later that he does. Lance Armstrong said the same thing in his book. It's not about the bike, and a couple other ones where he's like, I remember everything. Michael Jordan said the same thing. And so I see a pattern among some people that are highly competitive and very successful. Joe unpacked that a little bit though on his podcast, and he's kind of maybe recommended a less toxic way of doing the same thing. Yeah. But one thing you mentioned too was just never surrendering and pushing and delaying gratification, working hard. Those are things like I see Cam, he'll say it all the time. I'm not the smartest guy. I'm not the most talented. I'm not the this. I'm not the that. But I'm going to outwork everybody.
Yeah.
See, there's something to that.
There is. And then as well, on top of all that is having a why. Why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. A lot of people put their why around a financial why. They want more money. They want a bigger house. They want a nicer car. They want new shoes, whatever their why is. My why, Jordan's why, and Trevor's why has never been around financial. Now, do we need something to provide for our families? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But our why has always been with every single one of our companies, to try and improve other people's lives.
Yeah.
Kind of looking beyond ourselves. And so I think when you have, depending upon what your why is, it can set you up for failure or success very quickly.
So I like what you're saying. I'd like to go into a more tactical space a little bit before we talk to Jordan about the same thing, get his side. But I'd like to find out, what is it that you kind of do daily? Some of the things that you do. Like, do you have a routine? Do you get up at the same time every day?
Yes.
What's your routine?
So when it's not hunting season, because that changes everything, I wake up typically around 6:30 in the morning. My brain needs to be stimulated very quickly. So what I typically will do is I'll either open up my email or I'll open up like a social media app and I will start scrolling. I don't really care what I'm scrolling, what I'm doing, but that finally like stimulates my brain. And when my brain turns on, I'm immediately in business mode, like thinking mode, like Mountain Ops is on my mind. And my portion of Mountain Ops and what I need to do and the overall picture of what we're trying to accomplish here immediately gets ignited, but I need something to stimulate it.
Okay.
Most people need like
you and Jordan both especially are very you're in that generation, I think, too, where social media, ignites a drive or gets the engine and the juices flowing. Like exactly. I see you guys feed on it. Like, oh, okay, this, and it's like it's a connection you have.
It does what it does is it stimulates. Like for me personally, it stimulates my brain, especially if I get on social media. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not really caring what I'm seeing, but I scroll past and I see something cool. I'm like, that immediately stimulates an idea in my head of like, we should do something similar to that. Like if it's that cool. And then all of a sudden everything starts firing. And I have like, it'd be very interesting to see the way that my brain works, like in a CAT scan or whatever. Yeah. Because I can have multiple thought processes going on at once. Like I can be building a campaign for us over here while sitting in a meeting about finances, but then thinking about all I've got to do at home. I can have like so many things going on all at once.
Yeah.
Now get me to talk during that process. No, it all gets shut down. But if I can be quiet and just like seclude and have this, I can have a lot going on. And so that's kind of what happens in the morning. Then what I'll do is I'll go and I'll take a pre-workout, wait for that to hit. And I used to go to the gym. I don't have enough time in the morning anymore because I have too many freaking kids. So I got to help my wife with getting kids ready.
You guys have young families.
Yeah. I've got 4 kids ranging
I remember those days.
1-year-old to 9 years old. And so I literally will get about an hour workout in the morning. Then I'll start waking my kids up. I'll go hop in the shower while Nicole's feeding them breakfast. And then I'm driving them to school, coming here into work. From the moment I get into work, it's literally meetings, strategy, execution on what we've got to do on the marketing side of our business. And then there's meetings Jordan and Trevor and I will have on the overall picture of our business, just more how's everything going. I'm lucky if I can grab lunch. Honestly, it's just, you're just grinding. It's that never surrender mentality. Like I literally have to force myself to eat because I can easily just work right through that.
I don't think people realize what it takes to run a company. and one like this.
No.
Right? I don't think they realize it. And you walk in the doors and, I'm here for just 2 days to do some planning, some podcasting, and then I'm getting back home. I got goals and things I need to accomplish. This trip here is part of that. But I come in here and it's really tough to get someone to break away from their computer to do something because there's work to be done and everybody's addicted to their job and what they got to get done.
And that's the cool thing here is everybody doesn't feel like they're working. Everybody that we hire loves what they do, and we really try and focus on what their skill is. So like David, who does our photography, that's all he's got to worry about, and he loves it. We don't have him doing accounting and everything else. Like we literally just have those people that love and have a passion for something. That has become their profession. You were telling
me, this is probably something very valuable to the listeners, but you were telling me that there was a time when that wasn't the case, that you didn't hire people, maybe the right kind of people. So can you elaborate on that and what your philosophy is right now?
Yeah. So honestly, when you come through the hiring process of Mountain Ops, we don't really send out a lot of, like, hey, now hiring job openings or something like that, because we kind of know who we want to go after. We see a lot of potential in people that other people don't. Matt Davis is a great example of that. So what happens is when you come, before you even get a sit down to have a meeting with me for an interview, I will send you an email with a link to our core values that says, hey, go read our core values and beliefs. If you can't jive with this, like, it's not even worth it. I don't care how awesome you are as a person.
How much talent you have.
I literally don't care. And so what happens is I'll either get a response back like, wow, that's amazing, can totally get on board, or yeah, I can't jive with it either. And so it's like, cool, if you can jive, like, let's go to the next step. So then when they get in here and we're actually having a face-to-face interview, one of the very first questions is are you okay with dead animals? Like, we hunt here. Like, there will be times where we will be going out to the back of a truck and you're going to see what Jordan just killed or what fish was just caught.
In our world, that almost seems like a silly question.
It is, but you got to realize we are opening this up to the masses as an opportunity.
People with talent.
Yep, exactly.
Photographer, videographer, it doesn't matter. And they may or may not have a hunting background.
Exactly. So there was a time before we went through this filtering process where we would just hire for talent. And what would happen is we have literally created a culture here. A culture of positivity, a culture of a love of the outdoors, a culture of like a experiencing life. Okay. And when you add like a cancer into that culture, what happens is that cancer starts to affect the organs of this culture just as this cancer would inside the human body.
Yeah.
And so we used to hire people based on their talent. And what would happen is that person didn't hunt, or they didn't believe in our core values or one of our core values. And we would see over time a cancer created where that individual was becoming so opposing to what we would want to do as a company that it was like, this is not good.
Right.
So we changed our practices on hiring of who we do here. So literally every person that works in this company does not feel like they are going to work in the morning. They feel like they're going to play.
Which is so interesting, but just because my inner drive coming here and hanging out is like, I get to hang out with all these people that are creative, driven, talented, and interested in the same things I am. So I'm like, who wouldn't want to work here? But if I rewind it and I'm like, okay, if I were to walk into a dress fashion design business, shoot me now. Like, blow my brains out. Like, I could be as talented as can be, but if you want me to work in a dress design company, it's just, there's no passion there. I don't get excited about the people who come through the door.
Exactly.
I don't get excited about the stories, the trips, the message. There's no passion there. We don't have the same value system, ideals. I can see it being a huge problem. Seems like that was kind of obvious. Like, why did it take so long to figure that out?
No, and the other cool thing about Jordan and I is God has put an innate ability in us to see other people's potential. And so it's like when I first met you, I remember coming back and telling Jordan and being like, we got to do something with this guy. Like this is one of those people. This is somebody who doesn't understand who their potential is. They can see like, oh, hey, maybe I can create a podcast and maybe I can get like 5 people to listen to it and that'd be cool. And I'll find that as success. And I'm like, no, you don't realize you can get 5 million people to listen.
What's so interesting about that is that what's so ironic is I'm sitting here today and Mountain Ops was a baby company. And my very first podcast episode, Casey was there, and I had no idea what Mountain Ops was or him. And we hung out for a few hours. Mm-hmm. And then fast forward, I never knew. And when I sat down and did the podcast, I think I remember having this conversation like, well, what's all this about? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to talk to Aaron Snyder and do a show. And where's this? What's your goal? Goal? Like, I just want to sit here and blah, blah, blah. And then for you to envision something so much greater, that was not on my mind at all.
And we honestly see that with every one of our employees. So a lot of our employees, even though our need as a company may be, we need a senior graphic designer. Mm-hmm. We see an individual that's more on the junior level that Jordan and I are like, man, this guy has the right recipe.
Yep.
And he doesn't even understand his potential. We see it. We're going to help him reach it. And so where the value in that comes is they're like, man, this is a cool company to work for, cool benefits, cool perks, cool culture. Mm-hmm. But then we're actually investing our time because this is stuff, traits and skills that Jordan and I have taught ourselves or learned over the last few years that we're like, you're lethal, but we're going to make you deadly.
Yeah.
And so the thing is that is another part about what happens here in Mountain Ops is we look at every individual and the sky's the limit. It's not like, oh, sorry, this is where you're going to cap out for this position. Like literally we want every single person to make as much money to provide for their family as possible, but in return, give back that much in effort, work, passion.
Got to create a culture of loyalty, passion and just drive. I always felt like that, as even in my old, when I did consulting and I had a desk job at the office and the companies that really, like I worked at Nike as a consultant for a while and a couple of companies where they had a culture and a campus and it was an experience being at Nike and you got to be at Nike and there was a certain feel there. And I think companies who can create that, are special because a lot of times just I'm going to my job.
Mm-hmm. Let me clock in, clock out. And that is not what Jordan, Trevor, and I wanted.
Putting in time, Yeah. And there was a time where I wanted to climb the ladder and I was more dedicated. And there were times where I was like, it's 9, I get to leave at 5. Let's get a few things done and then let's cruise YouTube for a little bit because I'm going bored out of my mind here. It's a totally, and it feels like such a waste of your life.
Well, and I'll tell you the guys that have that mentality, they don't last long here because maybe 6 months, a year tops because they see everybody around them like digging in and so passionate. And if they don't feel that same passion too, they're just like, why am I here? I'm kind of the odd man out because everybody else can see it too, and so those guys don't last. So when we hire for culture. We don't hire for
perfectly like talent.
Yeah. For your, like you fit everything that we need. No, culture comes first.
So, Jordan's still here. Everyone who's listening.
I got rebuked earlier.
So if you guys feel like this is a different podcast, it is.
We are.
I've been told not to insert myself ever unless my name is said. So obviously I'm inserting myself because my name was just said.
Yeah, no, it's not to that extreme. Okay.
No, this is good.
What I want from you, tell me this, because I asked Casey this. What are people that are trying to be successful? What do you have to say to them that are trying to build a business and create something like what you've done here? What would you say to them that are struggling, trying, but what's your kind of blanket advice?
Hey, if they're struggling, that's good. Like first thing I'd say is struggle is healthy. It's part of the process. If you don't understand what it means to struggle, then you'll never know and appreciate what it means to be successful. I think one of the things that Casey said, in his way of saying it is, Casey and I are a lot alike in a lot of ways. Casey's like, I never surrender, like all these things. And Casey didn't say this, but he does do this, which is he's not satisfied, because once you become satisfied or you achieve what you had dreamed or visioned, successful people aren't just satisfied with reaching the end goal. I think it's a godlike trait that we really believe in, that like the yearning to learn more and to grow more. So Casey's levels, he does appreciate the journey, and Casey loves
and the successes
and the success. Like if anybody listened didn't get that, like Casey was trying to say that in his own way. Like we both appreciate those things as we have them, but we're both not satisfied because we see mountain ops. Like if I'm speaking to this business that we're sitting in right now, mountain ops, the vision that Casey and I had for this, and Trevor and Casey and I, and the vision we had, we've arrived where we thought we would arrive in 4 years.
No, where we thought we would be in 10 years, but it's been 4 years.
Yeah. Well, like where I knew the business could be in 4 to 5 years, our 5-year plan has come to pass.
Come and gone.
Yeah. Like we're there. And most people, like the vision that we have is the vision people have for like in 10 years. But we're already on to that next tenor of like 10 years. And there has been, like Casey said, this business is like 30 plus years in the making. And we touched on that earlier. So if I'm speaking to someone who's struggling or wants to be successful or wants to know what are the right things I need to do, man, there's so many answers to that. But I think some of the things for me that I've found that have helped me to be successful is, the struggle is part of the process. Accept it for what it is. But look at it as something to tell you that, as I've always been taught, when we receive trials and tribulation, there's a blessing associated on the other end. So just like success, as they say, is not a straight line, but a line that begins and then begins to move around and almost becomes this clustered ball. And then all of a sudden you come out on the other side. Right. And so perseverance is I think Casey touched on a lot of really good points that I would too touch on. He talked about a why, really having a strong why of understanding why you're starting. I think that right there for me is a part that so many people miss, is they say, okay, I want to start a business. And so I've got this idea. And so I've got social media and a store, and I'm going to make a product and I'm just going to go to market. Well, guess what? Like 1,000 other guys at the exact same moment you had that idea also had the exact same idea and are doing the exact same thing. So what the heck is going to make you any different than any of those 1,000 guys? Because you all are just making a similar product. You have it on social media, whatever, right?
Yep.
And it comes back to some of the things that Casey was saying, which was, I believe that it is in your why, because the things that have helped me to be successful in my life has always been grounded on a foundation of why I was doing what I was doing. If I was going into something for the pure fact of just doing it because I could do it, almost the gratification or the achievement wasn't as great, because it was like, well, when I got to the end, I was like, well, I did it, but now what?
Right.
And so I think to what Casey was saying, that kind of continual unsatisfaction of wanting, or not unsatisfaction, to not being just simply satisfied and yearning for more and looking to the next ridge or the next step in life. I would encourage people who are trying to be successful to stop and halt the brakes now on whatever you're doing, and to look at yourself and look at what you're doing and ask yourself the question why you're doing it. And here's why I would say that. So 2 companies, Apple, Dell, 2 very familiar companies, and both are successful companies. Somehow, though, over the years, one company is way more successful than the other. How is that, right? And there's this principle of what they call the golden circles, okay? And this golden circles is much like a target. So there's 3 rings to it. In the center, you have your why. On the second ring, you have...
You're talking about a bullseye.
Like a bullseye, yeah. And then you have your how, and then you have your what.
Your what now.
Yeah. And so when you go from your why to your how to your what, there's a significant difference, not only in an individual, but also in a company, in how their success is created from that. So, for example, and everybody just don't worry, we're getting to it, but this is going to be this is actually some really good information for everybody to your point. A lot of companies or individuals will operate either from the inside out or the outside in. Okay. And what I mean by that is, in my example of Apple and Dell, and I learned this from a TED talk from, oh my gosh, he's one of my, he escapes me now, and I'll provide it, we'll put a link in there. But this gentleman explained it this way, and it was really impactful to me. And it's really how Casey and I have lived a lot of our lives, just it was more drawn out for us. So Dell, everybody remembers the iPad and the iPod and all the things that Apple's created, just everything that Apple is. Well, when the iPod came out, right, Steve Jobs, when he was still alive, he presented that to everyone, and he said, this is the iPod, and this is beautiful, elegant, simple, and it's 1,000 songs in your pocket. Would you like to buy it? And everyone bought it, right? But one of the things that Steve always stood for and always believed, and why he was always successful, even in the early beginnings of him and Wozniak when they began Apple, was their why statement as a company was, in everything we do, we change the status quo.
Challenge the
status quo. Correct. Yeah. In everything we do, we challenge the status quo. So in everything they built, and everything they do, and everything that they created together, or that came later, was always founded on that principle. And then he would tell you how they did that. And then they would tell you what they had to offer. And simply, all of a sudden, you have all these people who are buying this shiny product with an apple on it. And that story, without getting into the detail, is also a great story, because I've read his autobiography, and I'm actually reading it again because of his life and his example of failure and success, and what Apple even went through. Now Dell, so Dell is the other side. Dell, and how they usually operate, is they operate from the outside in. So what they say to you is, well, we have an MP3 player. Look what we have. How it works is there's these buttons here, and this is, it's got 1,000 songs on it, and this is why you want to buy it. Okay? So the difference is the way in which we're communicating, okay, and which way we're building or we're presenting.
Yeah.
So when I told you earlier, hi, this is a beautiful, elegant song, a beautiful, elegant design. It's simple. It's easy. It's got 1,000 songs in your pocket. Do you want to buy it? You're like, yeah, duh. We all did. But if I told you, hey, I've got this MP3 player. It's awesome. It's so great. It's got 1,000 songs on it. This is how you use it. And this is why you want to buy it. You're a little bit more reluctant, and that's just the subconscious of every single human being's mind because of how we're being communicated to. And so I think that goes back to the principle of, if you want to be successful in life, and why is it that Mountain Ops is doing so well against somebody else, or why is it that Yeti Coolers is doing so well against its competition, or these things, or why is it that Brian Call and his podcast seems to be doing so much better than some of these other ones? That's always the question, whether it's individualized or whether it's collectively like a brand or a corporation or a company or a product. And it really comes back to the core, the why. If you understand from before you begin your journey, why you're beginning your journey, and you understand then how you're going to accomplish that, and then you understand too what you're going to do once you get there, all of a sudden everything becomes full circle. Everything becomes for an individual or for a company different. And so for me, what has really helped me and those who who I have been fortunate to be successful with is because we had a strong why. And so I tell everybody pump the brakes, because you need to, before you say to yourself, I want to be successful, or I want to do this, I want to be an influencer in the industry, or I want to start a podcast. Ask yourself the question why you want to do that. Create a statement. Mm-hmm. Why am I going to do this? Our why here, and Casey mentioned it earlier, is in everything we do, we improve the quality of,
improve the lives of individuals and families.
Mm-hmm. So everything we do at Mountain Ops starts there, from product to a shirt to a hat. And so
I would, just, if I can interject for a second, I've told myself this for, 20 or more years. Even, in fact, I remember when I was a missionary in Japan, this was something I learned, when I was out there. So I was knocking on doors like missionaries do. These, the Mormon missionaries. Yeah. And, I'm in Japan. I've learned a foreign language. And when I knock on a door, I remember knocking on a door to work the butt off of my companion who I didn't like. Like, I literally got up early, drug him outdoors. We knocked on a million doors. We talked to everybody in the park. My motive wasn't to improve anyone's life. It wasn't to share a gospel of love or anything else. My motive was to work this kid's butt into the ground because he annoyed me. It wasn't the purest motive. It wasn't a good one at all. And I did. I worked his butt to the bone. Like, I wanted to make this kid like just tired, and I wanted his respect, and I wanted him to be. I just want, he aggravated me. He's one of those guys that walked around the apartment and sung show tunes all the time. It was just we had a hard time getting along. But I realized later, that's not why I was there. That's not what my reason for being there up until that moment and after was, because I wanted to change people's lives. I wanted to help families. I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people overcome demons and struggles that they had. I wanted them to learn things like delayed gratification and love and charity and patience. And, I wanted to share a message about Jesus Christ and his example and what that could do for someone else's life, right? These sort of things. But when my why was, or my motivation was to just make this arrogant kid work his butt off, it wasn't the best reason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it translates into, it bleeds over into everything. Mm-hmm. Everything you do gets tainted by that motive.
Yep.
And
it's an absolute ripple effect. When you think about, like, and again, going back to the question, what do you say to all these people? Like, the question is answered in a question. Mm-hmm. Why? Why are you going to do this? And everyone who comes to Casey and I and asks us, like, I've got this business idea, or I want to start this business, I want to do this, before they begin to even pitch either one of us on what it is, I always stop them and ask them why. Why are you doing this? And it's interesting to see the response, because they're like, well, I haven't even presented the product yet. Yeah, I haven't even told you the idea.
Yeah.
Why is it that Casey talked about our interview process. This is a process I go through when I see entrepreneurs, aspiring individuals who trust in me to give them some advice on what they could do to achieve something close to maybe what myself, Casey, and Trevor have created here. And that's the real simple answer is I stop them and I ask them why, because when you have true motive and it's rooted in a strong why and a core why that truly is in the benefit not only of yourself but others. Mm-hmm. The quote always comes to mind. They rise highest who lift as they go. And so when you think about that, where now Casey and I, as I look at the evolution of where Casey and I have been and where we are sitting in these chairs with you today, mm-hmm. That has come because of, in past businesses where we've been successful, we had to learn along the way some real hardships, and we went through a lot of downs mm-hmm. and a lot of sacrifices and a lot of failures that Casey kind of mentioned earlier, and those all sucked. Mm-hmm. It just sucked. Like it sucks. But the thing that Casey and I both had going for us is together as partners before we became partners with Trevor and others later in different businesses is we both knew why we were doing it. We knew that we wanted to sacrifice everything we had, all the things we loved, like hunt and when we were doing our other businesses before we started a hunting company, we were sacrificing hunting, we were sacrificing sports, we were sacrificing these things. The one thing we weren't willing to sacrifice was like our family, right? That was like, that's never going to be sacrificed. Unfortunately, we had to sacrifice seeing our boys and our little girls and stuff growing up early in their early ages because we had to be building these businesses for long hours, and that meant not being at home. But anytime it came time to really be at home, we needed to be there. And so the other second part of how to be successful, and my interpretation of that is I see that the people who are the most successful are the people who help others to also create that same success, or also inspire others that don't hold that to their own, that don't hold that close and say, well, I learned all these things and I did all these things. And so
I've helped 100 podcasters start a podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, I want other people to be successful. And I'm like, here's how I do it. These are my ideas. I think that you're right. If you try to hold the doors closed and hold other people back, I don't think you're doing, like I heard Joe Rogan say, there's enough pie for everyone.
There is 100%. And Casey spoke to it a little bit earlier in the cultural aspect of Mountain Ops and what we believe and kind of our, ecosystem here is that we look at from ownership, myself, Casey and Trevor, to some of our executives, to our employees. There's a clear line and level that everyone stands on, which is, we all want to be successful, and we all want to be, that success is defined not by money, but defined by knowledge, understanding, skills, and sharpening the axe and becoming a better version of ourselves tomorrow than we are today. And so we really instill that in not being just what Casey, myself, and Trevor have done respectively, independently, but collectively, but bringing that same kind of partnership and ideology into our business. And I will say this because Casey touched on it, like our core values and beliefs. I'd encourage anyone, if you don't know what Mountain Ops is, it's been actually a while since Casey and I have been on the podcast. You've been busy, we've been busy, but if you've never heard of Mountain Ops before and you don't know us, go to mountainops.com, MTN OPS.com, and go to our page that is our core values and beliefs. And the very first thing on our core values and beliefs, and it's the very pinnacle number one value, is we recognize God and his hand in all things. And we truly, truly believe that. We've had some really interesting discussions, not only recently, but just in our business with things like, do we work on Sunday? We've got a gym that's going to be opening up here at the new Mountain Ops headquarters and base camp. Do we have that open up on Sunday? These things. And we've decided as a company that there's certain things that we want to keep sacred, which is like the Lord's Day, Sunday. And because we truly believe that he's our best business partner. So the third thing that I would recommend to anybody listening to this podcast, and this isn't just Mormons. This is just, I'm saying, guys, like if you believe in a higher power, whatever that is, that deity or that individual or that person that you believe is there, that loves you and cares for you, I would also encourage you to incorporate God as part of your business, because some of the most successful people that I've seen in my life that I truly love, respect, and adore are people who have done the same thing. They've incorporated God as part of their business, making him almost like we do, a business partner. So that as we come to making decisions and doing things internally, that same ripple effect begins to extend outwardly to those individuals who we are stewards over, like our customers and consumers, or people that live and love the brand or part of the culture. So those are like, I mean, again, and like you said, Brian, like with only a certain amount of time, I think there's so many other things I would have loved to have touched on and said, but that's really quickly what I would just share with everyone on this podcast. The same things my brother, I echo that he shared. And I just encourage people like he did to really find out what your why is. Like if you don't really know what that is, then you'll get so far down the road in your business and you may be successful, or you may not.
And it doesn't have to be that you're starting a business or running a business.
It's your life.
Yeah, I did that why back when I was going to college and getting my degree. And then after I got my degree, I have to tell you, like, a job in accounting or computers and information systems, you're not exactly changing people's lives. I go in each day and I'm making money for a big corporation, or I'm helping them get in compliance with laws and legal requirements and things like that, or security around IT. All this stuff it sort of helped this big conglomerate, covered spaces. I got paid well. But even in that setting, I was able to do that exercise to say, why am I here every day? And why do I do what I do? And help me take pride in what I did and do my best, really give my best to the company that was paying me to give my best. And that exercise can be done no matter where you're at or what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. In that book, he really talks about purpose. And various people have different meaning in their life, but that the overall point is that human beings thrive when they have meaning. And you can be in a world where everything has been stripped away and a human being can still find meaning. And those who do can get through some of the most horrible things that you can imagine. So why and meaning and motive and purpose all are really, really, really important.
Simon Sinek.
He's the TED Talk?
Yes.
Okay.
That was that was a video that Casey and I had watched.
Good.
And so
you weren't just on your iPhone,
no.
checking messages?
I'm like, I want it. This is in my head.
That's
still.
a pet peeve of mine. Like,
I want everyone to know.
99% of the time when I get on my phone on the podcast, it's in relation to the podcast. Yeah. And I get people that write in on the YouTube or whatever that are like, I'm really disappointed to see you distracted by your phone during the podcast. And I'm like, I am not checking my messages. I'm trying to get some information, or it's helping me form my next question. I'm on the phone for a reason.
That is what I was doing there. I was
sure.
like, I need to find this. It's Simon Sinek, and I had to text my wife real quick as well.
Only people that watch cast judgment.
I do want to say one thing about the why, though.
We got to wrap up. So
yeah. So the one thing I wanted to say about the why is ask yourself why in all things in your life. And typically when you remove yourself from that why and you place other people in it, it makes it a lot easier, more purposeful. You talk about life being filled with purpose. Pull yourself out of it. Why are you going to work every day? Is it to make you more money or to provide for your family? Why do you want to be a social media influencer? To be famous or to inspire other people?
I see. So when you take yourself from that equation, if your why starts with I want
that's not a good why.
Interesting. Yeah. That's an interesting exercise because it does force you to be outward thinking.
When I talk to people, just as Jordan said, whether they got a business idea or they want to do this, they're like, I want to be the next Cameron Haynes, and I ask them why, and they're like, well, because he has so many followers. Like, I want a lot of followers. That is a horrible reason right there.
Yeah.
What do you have to offer these people? Well, I don't know. I just want to be famous. And it's like, I can tell you right now, it's not going to happen.
Right.
If you say I want to motivate, inspire, and make a difference in this world, other people,
then you won't sell out either.
Yeah,
for certain things because you have
when it's not about you.
You will not sacrifice your core values, your beliefs, and your why of why you began the journey that you started. And to close it, this is something that I want to just add because of locale.
You don't get to close this.
No, you close it. You close it. Just real quickly, we talked about just a little bit earlier when Casey met Brian, and then Casey came back and told me about this guy. And I still remember Brian, and I sent you the picture of the three of us just recently.
We look my family reunion.
Yeah, we look like we're in pajama pants. You've got the Core 4 real tree pants. I have the ASAT. We got our Mountain Up shirts. It was just kind of funny how things have changed a little bit. But we were sitting in a Cabela's Outfitter tent doing a podcast for the very first time, the three of us.
Yeah.
And now we sit in what is going to be your podcast studio here at the new Mountain Ops base camp headquarters in Fruit Heights, Utah. And it's extremely humbling for me because when I look back, and we shared this in our meeting recently with everyone as we kind of were able to get back together as a company, the journey that all of us here on this podcast have taken independently, collectively, to come to here is really inspiring to me, even being one of the members on that journey. But I hope is also somewhat inspiring to others to see that I still remember that I asked you when we were there with your family why you were doing this. And you said, I do this because I love people. I'm fascinated by other people. I love to learn about them. I love to learn, not only learn about them, but learn from them. I love to see if I can help them. Like, I want to do this podcast thing because I just genuinely love people. And that was your why, which was very similar to like our why and why we were doing what we were doing. And so I just think, when people see this building, and for you guys, once it's finished and we do our grand opening, we'll let everybody know, but this will be a place for people to come. And for me, it's a monument and a testament to having a strong why that was to build this building on something other than ourselves and about other people. So I thought that was really cool. I know you christened it with Matt, here. He got the first podcast.
That's
we'll
right.
take the second one. But this is cool. This is cool. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I would love to continue this discussion. Yeah. But I know you want me to continue this discussion, but people in hell want ice water. So
your mom is awesome.
No,
our moms are the best.
I have got to get to the airport or I'm going to miss my flight. And I want to see my kids tonight. So anyway, this was a great discussion. I really thank you for opening up, sharing your thoughts. I hope those that are listening have learned a lot and have some takeaways. And until next time, stay gritty.
Stay gritty, everybody.
Stay gritty.
Despite our ever-changing, ever-indignant world with its growing ignorance of and indifference to the ways of the wild, I remain a predator, pitying those who revel in artificiality and synthetic success while regarding me and my kind as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood. I stalk a real world of dark wood and tall grass stirred by a restless wind blowing across sunlit water and beneath star-strewn sky. And on those occasions when I choose to kill, to claim some small part of nature's bounty for my own, I do so by choice, quickly, with the learned efficiency of a skilled hunter. Further, in my heart and mind, I know the truth and make no apologies for my actions or my place in time. Others around me may opt to eat only plants, nuts, and fruits. Still others may employ faceless strangers to procure their meats, their leather, their feathers, and all those niceties and necessities of life. Such is their right, of course, and I wish them well. All I ask in return is no one begrudge me, and all of us who may answer the primordial stirrings within our hunter souls, my right to do some of these things myself. What you just heard is a quote from M.R. James. We truly live in a world that is largely ignorant and indifferent to the ways of the wild. And although some regard us as relics of a time and place no longer valued or understood, we have the opportunity to change the way these people view the hunter and the hunt. We can share our experiences and nature's bounty with those who employ these faceless strangers. And by so doing, we make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for the wild animals and the wild places we care so deeply about. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting and the outdoors. Our wild animals and our wild places depend on it.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
Gritty Bowmen.